Now that I'm only doing one episode per month, I'm going to act on the feedback I got from my friend Eric and might include a bit more in these episodes. Some people have a lot to share, and I want to give them a platform to do so. This month, I'm excited to share a conversation with Rahamaan Statik. I'm a hip-hop head that enjoys all four elements of the culture, which includes breaking, MCing or rapping, DJing or turntablism, and graffiti. Graffiti is the one that I enjoy a ton, especially when I travel. I literally have the best spots in Chicago, the country, and the world pinned in my Google Maps account. Whenever I travel, I make an effort to see those walls and try and talk people into modeling with that art. You can see examples of it at graffnmodels.com, GRAFN models.com. It's been a really fun project and a great way to get out of the touristy areas when I visit cities around the world. Some people see graffiti and they just see messy scribbles. I encourage you to really look at the art like you would art in a museum. The styles, the commentary, and the artistry all deserve much more credit than people give it. I've known Statik's work for a long time, but I had no idea that one of the dopest graffiti artists in the game was also a classically trained fine artist with a broad range of skills and a proper studio. Okay, let's get into it. Enjoy the episode. Okay, I want to introduce Rahamaan Statik to the podcast, and like always, I want to start by asking you to introduce yourself to people so they know who they're listening to.
Got you. My name is Rahamaan Statik. I've been an active mural artist and street artist, graffiti artist, whatever you want to call me, for the past 30 years, since 1996. I also work as a fine artist and graphic designer and illustrator. You'll see my tagline on Instagram is the creative gladiator. You know, you can put me in any kind of artistic situation, always find a way out and a way to prevail. Let's just say, art has been the most consistent relationship I had in my life since I was a kid up until now as an adult, right there. Even to a point in which I would say it saved my life and it helped me define my path from a very young age, which adds to me being more prolific right now as an adult.
I usually ask people how we know each other, but we've really just been in the same spaces. And up until, I don't know, a couple months ago at Battle for the Eagle, I don't think we'd actually really met in person. And I was snapping photos and just kind of gave you a nod from across the cipher and pointed to my camera. And you kind of look back like you kind of knew my work. But I've been doing graffiti and models at graffnmodels.com for over 5 years, a little bit of a project. And I'm realizing that some of the murals that the models always pick when I'm at different spots are tagged with Rahamaan Statik. And, and then I started noticing it and I started seeing more of them. And we've had Binky on the podcast. And I know you did a really dope mural of Binky in the River North area. And I just thought it would be really neat to get you on to talk a little bit about what you do and why you're at home doing the art that you do. So I appreciate you taking the time out of this, because you also mentioned when we were preparing that interviews aren't really something that you do a lot of depending on who's reaching out to you. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as far as once I go on interviews, to clarify that also, I do interviews, but I'm picky with doing interviews, especially when it comes down to a point or the interviews I do have to be specific to me doing art.
Right.
So I may have opinions about other things outside of art, but I only like to speak on record during interviews about art because that's what I spend most of my time doing from my childhood even into my adult life. Therefore, that kind of makes me an expert in that, and I only like speaking about things that I'm an expert in, right? Especially if it's on record right there. So I went to art school, right? Got a BFA in multimedia web design, minor in fine art. That is my background, right? So, I have the credentials for it and the actual experience to back it right there. So, at the age I'm at, I'm not a big fan of just saying stuff for clout. That I can't back up in action and facts with receipts right there.
And you get a lot of people that will stop you when you're painting because you have a studio and you do fine art, but I know you from your graffiti art and your street art. And I have to believe in some of the walls I've been to, they're high traffic areas. A lot of people try and stop you and talk to you and just sort of chat you up.
Yes, that does happen, for a lot of reasons. People will stop by and want to make conversation because a lot of these individuals have never seen art get made in their life.
Right.
By a real person, let alone a person is doing something that's that interesting. Another angle will be, especially with the people that have to live by it, they may see it develop over time and eventually say something and commend it right there, or say something negative, right? Whatever moves them, right? I've had like some interesting interactions with the public by doing that. So there have been times I painted in a lot of dangerous areas in this city, and I would get stopped a lot. Some people I feel especially in areas like that, I'll feel more of an obligation to speak to because they do have to live with it, and I'm kind of making it for them, right?
Right.
So like the bizarre situation that I had with that was that, like, true story. I've had like people that would presume as being the neighborhood drug addicts or homeless people to random people, individuals in the neighborhood that don't appear to be that upright, right? So for lack of better words, they'll stop by and give me tip money. Right, and there'll be situations where it'll be late at night. I'll be out there about, like, after midnight or something like that, and or even during the day. But the late night thing is even more stranger on a good side of the streets. Right, I've had situations where people that were presumed as being homeless give me money, offer me money. I'll tell them to keep their money, and they'll keep offering to me, so I'm taking their money off the second or third time. Right, but that happens. But them doing that, why I had to take their money wasn't because of was more complicated than me wanting lunch money. I was happy that it moved them.
Right.
And I've had situations where some of those individuals were able to read the entire narrative of the wall, exactly to the point where I was trying to get at. They would look at the little details and intricacies and everything. I don't know, a lot of those individuals, it would seem to hit home with them even more, right? As far as looking at, it's more than just something in the background, right? It's something that they can feel, that they feel empowered off of. The flip side of that situation, I'm painting in areas of downtown Chicago, River North, the Loop, South Loop, etc. Right? The questions in the foot traffic would increase a lot, right? Because like a lot of these areas are tourist traps also.
Right.
So now you have a person that's never been in Chicago. They're on their way to a hotel, and like the first thing that catches their attention is me painting the wall. So they're bound to say something, right?
Right.
That will go on for a while, so much to a point of where what was supposed to have been 12 to 15-hour day at the wall now turns into me being at the wall for just overnight, 24 hours.
Right.
Some of these projects will be commissions. A number of them be commissioned projects. And I'm like, I'm getting paid to be here. I got to get this done and cash out, but it has to look good. So, yeah, it'll turn to me being, like, literally stand up all night to play catch-up on my overall art quota for the project for that day. So it reaches, when I seen it reach this climax, I thought it'd be a good idea to put out a tip box, and it's just they tip me in order to have a conversation with them.
Right.
Because for one, I know tourist trap, they have it. It's not personal. This isn't a neighborhood in Chicago. This is a tourist trap. And for two, I know that I'm long-winded, right? I know I'm long-winded, and I know, whatever it is that you pay me, I'm going to give you your money's worth right there. So, yeah, I put out a tip box since they pay me. And, they walk away with some game on art and painting and a sticker right there in a good handshake. But at least they would have learned something new. For the most part, the results of that, it did weed off a number of individuals. And I got to focus on and get better quality attention if I wasn't talking to as many people.
I appreciate you taking the time for this conversation in particular, and we'll get into the art in a little bit, but I do want to give people a heads up at the end. We'll talk a little bit about where they can see your art, and I'll be sure to post some links to your art in the show notes. But thanks for coming on today, and I look forward to the rest of this conversation. Statik, I like to start by asking people about their first exposure to their home. So in your case, can you share a little bit about your first exposure or experience to being an artist or a graffiti writer?
My first experience being an artist or a graffiti writer, here's the way it worked out. When I was a child, I was always into comic books and anime, cartoons, things of that nature. Back in the 80s, early 90s. As the early 90s came on, I got deeper into comic books. I even wanted to be a comic book illustrator back in the early 90s, doing that comic book trend. Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane and Jim Lee, dudes of that nature, right? I used to go to comic book conventions, always be in a comic book shop. But man, like also during that time, I was like just taking notice to like the culture of hip hop. So I began to notice like the culture of being a comic book illustrator wasn't that exciting. Right? It was very productive. It will keep you out of trouble because you'd be in the house all day drawing comic book panels. But yeah, I'm sorry, it wasn't that exciting versus like what I was seeing, on your own TV raps in Rap City.
Right.
Rock Kill No Joke video.
Right.
Like first seeing like, actual graffiti characters as a kid, right? The hip hop dudes I could relate to more. So I wound up going more down that rabbit hole. It was maybe sometime like maybe in junior high. I originally started, trying to DJ, break dance, and rap and do graffiti. I was trying to do all four elements
of hip hop.
Yeah. as I got through high school, they kind of began to trickle off one by one. So the first one that I stopped doing was breaking. Now I did that when I was in junior high. No, it
Wasn't your thing?
wasn't my thing at all, right? The second one I'm cutting out, maybe somewhere around my sophomore year in high school, was DJing, because I couldn't afford to buy records and art supplies every other week, right there.
Right.
Like, yeah, I didn't have the budget for that
Right.
as a kid. Maybe I could have kept up with it. Another conversation. The last one I want to stop in somewhere around my junior year also was rapping, because honestly, I knew a lot of guys that are now professional rappers that do this for a living.
Right.
And I didn't want to insult the thing that I was most passionate in. So upon entering my senior year in art school, I just narrowed it down to visual art. So simply once I got accepted into art school, I just narrowed it down to visual art. Because then at that point, I had a scope of what the standard was as far as visual art and graffiti, specifically graffiti, those two. Also during that time in my junior year, that's what else it was. I'm catching the case for vandalism right there, right? So, and while in jail, this is one night in jail, wasn't prison system like that. Yo, me and my homeboys I was locked up with, we all made a pact to never get caught up for like just scratching in on bus windows again. And we evolved to painting walls. That's all we're going to do. We're going to be prolific at it.
Right.
That pact was made through that situation.
So I have to ask, when you made that pact, are the other guys still painting? Are they doing walls? Are they still part of the crew?
Yeah, for Omar. Like, I was locked up with, well, my homeboy Max Sansing got arrested during the same case. He was a year younger.
Max's art is phenomenal.
Yeah,
Max does
it
phenomenal art.
It is. Yeah, me and him go way back as far as our experience as an artist and our journey into this. So, like, his mom had picked him up. Legally, she could do that, right? He was 16. I was 17. Everybody else I was arrested with was above the age of 17. So he took all of us to jail and put us all in a bullpen together, right? So it was me, my homeboy Max Sansing, Pugsy Adams.
Yep, I know Pugs.
Right? My homeboy Arthur Banks, and this one dude named He Used to Write Cigar. I have no idea what happened to this dude. Max Sansing and Pugsy Adams are still highly active as artists. My homeboy Arthur Banks works and operates as more of an illustrator right now.
That's cool.
And youth art instructor.
When did you first paint a wall outside? So you talked about scratching in the windows and illustrating things at home. When did you first get that taste of like, I did this giant piece, or I did this big wall, or a small mural on a big wall?
All right. I have to calculate this better. My first time painting a wall outside was actually in 95 in this freight layup off of 95th Street between 95th and Jeffrey in South Chicago, because I used to live down the street from there. So all I had to do was run up a hill and paint a freight. That was the first time I painted like a static freight train. It was actual graffiti, right? So I was doing graffiti at that time. Yeah, and that was me actually trying to creatively paint something in that kind of went somewhere. The second time was underneath the Promontory Point Tunnel. I did my first actual little mini production underneath that tunnel. Yeah, I knew it was trash. It looked like trash, but like it was enough to keep me motivated right there. It was not the best thing underneath that viaduct. So from there, I found other little low-key spots to paint at. There's one spot we used to call the B's and Su's behind Olive Harvey College, off 103rd Street. And the other place we used to go to called the Hilltop, right? Where these were like low-key spots you just go and paint at. It was off like freight train lines, right? Kind of dangerous areas, but you get your experimentation right there, right? So I kind of got my start with that there, just to see even if I can do it. By taking that approach, also, like I knew it was smart to photograph everything I painted, taking around other graffiti writers, show it off, and maybe link up with some other people that want to paint walls. And like that was, I was able to I met Max Sansing maybe within the first year of me painting walls. Yeah, I took him to his first paint mission, which is at the B's and Su's. And there were times where we would drive there, or we even walk there from 95th Street through the forest behind us. We wouldn't be seen. But it was a fun little expedition right there. And a lot came from that.
So let me ask you.
But with that photo book though, yeah, it was maybe like a good 5 or 10 photos around some all the peers that was trying to paint, and we found a way to paint more, and it kind of spiraled from there. The photo books got bigger, the network got bigger, people got more skill right there, right? We were able to study our last works right there, and it was back before digital cameras. We had to go to a 1 hour photo and get everything developed within that 1 hour right there. So like you got that one roll, you kept shooting, so you got everything right. So I got a lot of blurred photos, even to this day.
That's comedy. But, for people who aren't in the culture, you're talking about there's a bunch of spots that people know, and some of them are legal walls, some of them are permission walls. But there's a lot of places you can do some really great art, and I try and find those everywhere I go. I have to ask, though, if that's how you got your start, when did you realize that you could be a professional artist? You know, I like to think of this as your superhero origin story, but when did you realize like this was going to be it for you and you could make a living doing this?
Yeah, somewhere between the year 1999 and the year 2000, around my freshman year in art school. And by that time, once I entered art school, I was all in. That's why I was there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the school that I went to, a number of other talented graffiti artists in the city of Chicago went to that school.
Oh,
So I
wow.
figured that was a formula to be fresh. When I enrolled there, I looked into their alumni, and I saw their alumni at the school where was a lot of household name artists that I also revered. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like Alex Ross, the
Mm-hmm.
guys that made Mortal Kombat, the brother Reginald Jolly that made the Sprite Obey Your Thirst Voltron campaign. I can keep naming a lot of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, yo, like as far as graffiti writers, the homeboy Solo, who is my homeboy Johnsky, keep naming names of like talented
Mm-hmm.
graffiti writers that went there and and street artists, and that's kind of what we all got in common to this day. But the art school experience was that I was learning the standard of like how to make your work look public friendly and what you see in media right there.
Mm-hmm.
And my move was to test it on the streets and combine what I was learning in art school and apply it to what I'm doing on these graffiti walls right there.
Right.
Started pushing the envelope a little bit more to a point of where, like real quick, a lot of these graffiti writers say, this dude ain't doing graffiti. And it kind of wasn't. You know what I'm saying? Like, secondly, looking back at it, it was actually street art before the term street art was even made.
Right.
You know, especially doing these elaborate characters between these pieces right there. That's a lot of the street art right there. The character between the graffiti piece. Because a lot of times people will come to the wall and want to see and be interested to the character. That's what they can relate to right there.
Right.
But when I knew I could do this, was like art school, like that. Started studying art history. I started meeting other like elder artists that were in the profession right there. The first graffiti artist I knew that his own art studio was a homeboy Slane.
Mm-hmm.
Slane, that was the first dude I knew that invited me to the art studio to see how he worked. From there, I want to meet a bunch of other like professional artists during that time. Slane, Flex from Keystone Crew, my homeboy Casper,
Mm-hmm.
Design, right? And these are still artists that still
Mm-hmm.
in business to this day. Some of them I was able to intern in their studio, kind of do their grunt work, and all that. And like, and it is maybe when I was back like 19 years old, right there. Because I was on a mission to, understand if I want to do this, why not study the people that are local that are doing it. I thank them for letting me to their studios, especially with all of them being past graffiti writers, and now they're in the business of making art, right
Mm-hmm.
there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still actively making art. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, like 1999, my first checks came off art. But hey, when I quit my day job though, 2004, right, the last day job I had was working as a telephone fundraiser for the School Art Institute, right, to pay people for the money on behalf of the School Art Institute. A very good learning experience right there. I actually learned how to fundraise, right? Like, yeah, fundraising for art. But
once you get that skill under your belt, you're ready to go on your own.
I lost my total fear of rejection. If no one doesn't want to contribute, it's all good. Ask the next person as quick as you can.
Statik, I want to get into a few of the things that are special to you about your art and your work as an artist. Where should we start that conversation?
That's the question. What makes my art special, and to give the people a better understanding of my process and faith. All right, for starters, as an artist and at the age I'm at, experience, all that, I produce art using a scientific method. And that's a lot of trial, error, study your results, combine the positive results to get somewhere else. Secondly, year by year, I'm in competition with myself. My default goal is to at least be a better artist than what I was last year in the previous years. So there's this constant competition with my previous work right there. With that constant competition within myself, that kind of makes me a fan of almost everybody's work.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as all being data, both positive and negative. And it makes it possible so I can withstand both positive and negative criticism.
Do you get a lot of critiques on your work? I know some of the places I've been aren't places where I think art critics are going, but you also have plenty of work in your studio and in shows and in public places, like you mentioned downtown. How do you get critique as a street artist or as a graffiti artist?
Yeah, how do you get critique as a street artist or a graffiti artist? One, people walk up to you and tell you anything, right? So like you kind of have no control over it on the street. once it hits the internet, people will leave positive comments or people will troll. The only time I've had to deal with trolls, count a few situations on one hand. One significant time I had to deal with trolls was when I did a project for Marvel for the Black Panther 2 movie. There was a lot of trolling with that. A lot of trolling I had to deal with. And I'm like, all right, cool. But even in that case, I did go back and forth with a number of these trolls because it was like a number of stuff these dudes said. I'm like, yo, that's not true at all. Like, where are you getting this shit from? You're just making stuff up and said it. But then also let me know that, yeah, it was that big. Another thing that you guys understand about my art is there's a mission and a faith that I have with producing public art and just still pursuing art. It's becoming spiritual. It's almost as if, you remember you used to watch those Muhammad Ali fights, you'll pray before every match?
Mm-hmm.
You know what happens if you try to tap into like that spiritual higher power energy within your process of making work, but then kind of let that faith roam and become free right there, which could actually appear to be a form of borderline insanity if you're not a part of that faith, right? Like, this dude is crazy, thinking God has given him superpowers to make art. But yo, what if you accept being crazy like that? It's kind of funny the more you think about it, but it's utilizing the power of even that. And that's kind of like my outlook on life, is seeing like the power in everything and seeing how even the negative and the dark power can be utilized in some situations. So what happens when you utilize that spiritual power with your process and mission of doing art? When you do that, it gets a lot more complicated, a lot more fearless, a lot more selfless,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and a lot more crazy looking because you ready to put it all on the line, right? Yeah, at this point as a street artist, I'm known to be prolific enough to where you can mention people to me where I'm sorry, I forget a lot of their names and faces, but they know of me through my work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And also, if we meet on the street, you want to talk to me, I'm here. We can talk. I don't push people away like that, especially if I know that you respect my work enough to think about it like that. No artist is entitled to anybody's intention. You're not entitled to that as an artist, to the attention of the audience right there. That has to be earned. Get that attention, you have competition also. So then you have to be a lot more serious about it to a point of where like, yo, it being good is subjective depending on the audience. But what's not subjective is you doing what you got to do to stand out. So all that comes into play with understanding me as a basis of understanding me as an artist.
Thanks for sharing a little bit about your mission and your purpose as an artist, and especially the part about your art pushing you to be a better artist year in, year out. I want to ask, when we were preparing, you mentioned that you're also trying to convey a story with your art, and that story is special to you. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. You had actually said specifically, I jotted this down, it's a visual narrative without a written explanation. And it got me thinking, like, how do you develop that narrative? How do you decide what is the message that's so special that you're going to take hours, weeks, months out of your life to create something for the public to consume and digest your message, whether they want to hear it or not? Where does that inspiration come from?
The inspiration behind my message, especially with public art, is to inspire the people that have to see it and live with it every day, inspire them to, quote unquote, be their higher selves, inspire themselves to make better decisions in their life, inspire people to feel empowered. Essentially, what I'm doing is almost like the anti-billboard. So I'm not trying to sell you any merchandise or products, or I'm not trying to convince you to shop. I'm just trying to get you to do some introspective thinking, trying to broaden your horizons. I figure if you see it every day in your peripheral vision, something might change within your head right there. So like that leads also to going hard on taking that on by creating the Be Your Higher Self brand and moniker, where years would go by, right, where I would paint graffiti walls of friends, these people's names and stuff, cool characters.
Mm-hmm.
But then like every so often the person will pull up like, hey man, that look cool. Like the characters in the middle. But I don't understand those letters. And letters look real abstract. I don't understand that.
Right. Graffiti
writers understand that. You're part of subculture,
mm-hmm.
right? Or if you're around subculture, but just the layman doesn't understand that. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of make the hero or the focus of the wall similar to a billboard, the tagline of the wall, being Be Your Higher Self moniker. So it's usually the Be Your Higher Self logo that I design with some person or persons appearing to be empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was one angle where I took that on, where I'm going to be literal was trying to reach out to the people with my approach to doing public art. Also, not only is it saying something, but it's also depicted where I'm bringing museum standard painting to the streets and to these wild neighborhoods, considering, and what I know, the average person just doesn't take time to go to an art museum. They might want to understand it, but they don't take time to go to art museum. And the other factor is that, yeah, these public schools have failed our communities with the art programs that should have been there by defunding it right there. I was a product of that and escaped it. And now I'm making a statement against it within my adult life.
It's interesting. You're almost describing it like you're an art missionary, sort of going out into the neighborhoods that art has been neglected and creating a piece that they can't help but see because it is giant and they're going to pass it every day.
It's somewhere between a missionary and an insurgent. Yeah, a creative insurgent.
Yeah.
You know, because yeah, insurgent on a level where sometimes those walls were permission.
Yeah, I know that too.
It was space, and we claimed it to make the point. You know, somewhere between the two, where it get extreme. You know, so where like certain lines and certain walls may be broken to make the point.
I also have seen some of your work where I think you have a little bit fun with it. Like you have a message, but I've also seen some characters that were saying things, you know, like I think you had a preacher at one wall that I was at and he was holding a Bible in one hand and is shaking his finger in the other hand. And the caption, the little comic book call out, actually, now I'm putting it all together, said something like, you know, if you don't believe in Rahamaan Statik, you're going to burn in hell or something like that. It was kind of comical given like where we were in the rest of that wall. Like you seem to have a lot of fun when you paint too.
Oh yeah, I have to have fun when I'm painting. You have to have fun, and there has to be some kind of creative discovery, and there has to be a certain point in which, in order to achieve that creative discovery, I got to be doing stuff and producing stuff that I haven't done before. So like, if there's a challenge of me having not tried that painting effect, I'm going to try it.
Right.
Just see if I could do it. In regards to one piece you're talking about, yeah, I painted that for the Meeting of Styles maybe back in 2019.
Yep.
And that was me on another style and approach to where I would collage images together inside of a face to kind of create like a deeper narrative. Just a portrait of a face on a wall. I mean, it's cool, but like by today's standard of street art and mural art, it just has to be deeper. Mm-hmm. So like people aren't being caught up in the allure and the awe of being surprised that you can actually do art with spray paint.
Right.
That's improving enough to a point of where now you're just painting, right? And how does it stand up to an actual painting, right? So this is kind of where it comes full circle,
right? Where
like luckily, like I said, I study art history, oil painting. I know how to acrylic paint. Where my overall style of painting kind of becomes one after a while, right? And that's what also going to go back and forth. I did that theme as a sense of humor, contradiction, because it originally said if you don't follow Rahamaan Statik on Instagram,
that's right,
you're going to hell. The State Street preacher, for everyone that doesn't know, he was just an actual preacher with a congregation. When I come to find out, by the name of Reverend Samuel Chambers, where this dude has been standing on the corner of State and Randolph by the Old Navy, or State and Row by the Old Navy, for almost 30 years, preaching the same thing. Basically, you know, hey, if you commit any remote cardinal sin, you're going to hell. You smoke cigarettes, you're going to hell. You fornicate, you're going to hell. If you commit adultery, you're going to hell. Yo, I used to essentially go by this guy smoking cigarettes just to hear him tell me I'm going to hell, right? He kind of did more harm than good, right? I'm sorry, dude. He kind of did more harm than good. Because at that point, I'm like, well, you know what? Hell must not be that bad, right? Because a lot of us are going, we still want to cigarettes in hell. Like, yo, like, yeah, sorry, dude. Like, that did not in any way pull me anywhere close to our Christianity, yo. Anything that push people further away.
The good news is,
sorry,
the good news is I was following you on Instagram after that, so I was safe.
Oh, word. There you go. Here's where I'm going at. As far as utilizing energy, though, where I respect him at, though, although his opinion may be good or bad to some, is that this man was dedicated. He had faith. He was out there for 30 years straight. I see his snow, rain, cloudy days, wool suit with a coat, little suit in the summertime, right? Like, this dude had dedication, man. To his beliefs. Like that's something, you know, I did note about that, right? So rather than me being insulted by him, by hearing him say that every day I walk past him smoking a cigarette, I'm like, oh, you know what, man, this dude is, man, I need to have this type of dedication. He has faith and dedication there, right? What if I apply that kind of dedication to my art? And that's kind of where it comes full circle at. So like, that's how I was able to respect him enough to even depict him in a painting. Like I hold no malice against him. He said nothing to me that hurt my feelings enough to where I'm like, man, F that dude. No, man. Like, I get it. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, respect to Reverend Samuel Chambers. That player is dedicated to his game, right? Preaching a sermon, and damning the entire city of Chicago, you're going to hell, right? We all go to hell if you're from the city of Chicago. It's all good, right? Maybe Chicago already is hell.
After we did the prep for this, I went back to your website and just looked at some of your photos of your work and some of my photos of your work. And I noticed a few recurring themes and motifs in your art that I haven't seen in the wild personally, but it was cool to see them on your website. And you already talked about the be your higher self sort of brand and messaging, and that, it's not the characters that are the feature, but it's a tagline that's the feature surrounded by other art and other characters and other really interesting things that people will take to heart if they catch the art. You have a couple of other things that you're working on and a couple of other motifs or mascots that you use. Let's talk about those for a little bit, because when we were preparing, it was clear that those are also special to you as you're doing your art around the city and frankly around the country and around the world.
Right. Like another recurring theme, the panda. You always see me painting. This is my personal mascot, my panda mascot. One of his names is Staticon. Right. That's what I titled him. The reason why I picked the panda though is because of the nature of the panda. A panda is a bear. Bears are pretty strong, apex predators. They can kill humans. A panda is also a bear, but chooses not to kill humans. It chooses to chill in the forest, eat bamboo, hang out with other pandas, all right, live life, right? But still, panda is still a bear. That panda want to do some bear stuff, it could. I begin to see the pandas being a form of like a humble predator. So a panda has the power to be a predator, but it chooses not to pursue being a predator. Yeah, and that's kind of like the way I carry myself as a human being, as a man. Whereas, like, I do have a lot of brute strength and force, but, I choose not to apply it to hurting people, right? In any kind of way. I'd rather use that energy and force and strength to make life, create forms of life, to create art with, to be creative with. So, like, from there, I created the Panda mascot baby back in 2010. Mm-hmm. Right back in 2010, I kept running with it over the years to where like now it's like many variations of the panda mascot, and I kind of developed its own world. So where now it's not just one form of the mascot; it's almost a whole little legion I have of them. Right, where sometimes you may see the panda appear as like almost looking like a panda combined with Mega Man. Other times you may see the panda appear as a person wearing a panda hat, and other times you may see the panda appear just as an actual panda in different colors here, so it's different variations of it. But yeah, I chose the panda as being creative spirit animal, if you will.
Yeah, it's almost autobiographical in terms of what it's based on, and you're conveying it through art. You also referred to yourself as an Afrofuturist, and some of the things that you're doing in your art are bringing in Afrofuturism. I wanted to make sure to talk about that because I thought it was fascinating, and it opened up a whole new line of thinking, and I went down the rabbit hole after we talked about it.
Yeah, like my connection with the Afrofuturist style is that on some levels I've had other artists and curators kind of label me as that, and on a lot of levels I accepted it because I kind of do a lot of work under the same moniker and theme and narratives a lot of the times. So essentially, it's like creating artwork where you're putting Black people and people in color and empowered imagery in fascinating cosmic spaces, right? Very imaginative, but specifically cosmic, right? Which is its own infinite and abstract representation through art. So with that, you could buy like a lot of these ideas of what you know about the cosmos with like Black culture and African culture, and you may create something more abstract and innovative. Because look at it like this, yeah, in a nutshell, you can still be pro-Black or pro whoever you are, and not make people feel alienated, right? You can flex on the things that make your culture fresh, that either A, they feel people should know, or B, people like seeing more of right there. And that's its own rabbit hole, right? You don't have to come through down anyone like that. It's a lot more positive things that you shine light on that people want to see more of. Like Black people want to see part of and non-Black people want to see part of. Besides that, as a Black creative, it's kind of up to us to decide on how we're going to tell our story and the legacy we leave behind our work. By putting our work out there, etching the work in stone, and staying prolific with making work to the day you die, to where what you leave behind is a lot for you to manage and deal with.
Mm-hmm.
It'll take a while to throw all of it away and shit out on those buildings.
And,
see what I mean?
And you're also including other styles sort of influenced from your art school training. You know, you had mentioned Renaissance painters and other artists that you're incorporating their styles or their work or their techniques into your work. So even though you're doing something that people are labeling as Afrofuturist, it feels like you're blending a lot of other styles and influences into that art.
Correct. What you see as far as that blending and influence of styles literally came from me studying, like taking art history classes in college and reading entire art history books from cover to cover and having to write thesis reports on it. What that did was, as an artist and human being, instead of seeing different cultures and races through politics and war, I began to see all these people through the lens of art and creativity. And what I discovered was that everybody kind of has something dope to contribute to what we now know as being art and visual art. Like everybody has something dope to contribute. From that, there's some characters I kind of got hung up on. They flat out changed my overall style of making art. One of the artists was by the name of Caravaggio. He created the style called chiaroscuro. Caravaggio was a Renaissance artist that was around during the time of Michelangelo. The Renaissance took place between the 1400s to the 1500s in Europe. Caravaggio, he created the style of light out of dark painting, which is used a lot in current painting and oil painting, right? Where you may see it most common at is if you watch the Bob Ross videos of him painting a landscape. He starts off on a dark canvas a lot of times.
We've all
right?
seen those.
Right. That, like, the father of that style is on Caravaggio, and Caravaggio, I would say, was the Tupac or worse of the Renaissance, and I would say it was worse. Yeah, he was openly gay during the Renaissance while working for the Catholic Church. From my understanding, he killed at least 2 people. Basically, he used to, like, flat out, want to put hands on you and stab you to death if he thought you bit his style, essentially, right? And another case I read about, he killed a person over a gambling debt. So he was on a run from, the law at that time while still making these payments for the Catholic Church. Eventually he was caught and he escaped from jail and wound up dying on a beach. He had a poetic death right there. But the whole thing was pretty wild. Imagine a guy looking like a Three Musketeer, right? Hey man, dueling with you right there, right? Because your style is too close to his. It's pretty wild.
It's funny you talk about that being the Renaissance, hundreds of years ago, and I've been at places where graffiti artists are at the wall and they're talking about this dude bit my style and this dude bit my style. Get your own style, do your own thing. It's been
a thing amongst artists since artists have gotten attention, right? If you want to be special, I get that, but through studying like classical Renaissance art and even like being a digital artist currently and studying current digital art, I kind of fell into place by being between both worlds, like modern digital art and classical Renaissance art. I've always tried to find ways to blend the two together, right? So like that's what kind of put me on the verge of coining a style or my style that I'll call a nuclear chiaroscuro. Nuclear on the hand of it being like modern American Cold War technology. And to elaborate on that more, is nuclear on a level where a lot of the technology happened as a result of World War II and the Cold War. World War II introduced the use of the nuclear bomb. It studies nuclear fusion. So that nuclear thing could provide a lot of life and a lot of death all at the same time. With that said, I'm a Black American male that makes art. My passport says I'm American. I don't care about being political, but like what I am is what I am. I'm going to own it. And what I mean by that is I painted in situations, where I've been, the international meeting of styles in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to only few people from America there. So it's not static for the city of Chicago. It's static United States. Basically, in a lot of these spots here, it's about who you are, what city you're from, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
international circuit is who you are, what country you're from.
Right.
It's not as much to do with your city or your race. It's more of your nationality. So now upon being in those situations, now, once again, I harness all that energy, both good and bad. There's certain expectations that come from that. Also, if you representing this team, you at least want to see your team wins and go all out right there, right? Like taking those influences, let's just say from America and Europe, current America, classic Europe, steampunk, Current America, Nuclear Rage, Incredible Hulk, right?
Right.
The Weapon X program type stuff, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at with that, right? Binary code, right? Like all that came as a result of the Cold War. So what happens when you combine them both together? My theory about combining all that is still on the search of creating something original and being a better artist than what I was from the previous year before.
Statik, I want to thank you for coming on today. And as we wrap, I'd be crazy not to tell people how they can find your art and support your work. So do you want to give them a heads up on where they can find more and see more?
Yes, sir. You can find and see more of my art at RahamaanStatik.com, spelled RAHMAAN, Statik, STATIK.com. Or you can also follow me at Rahamaan Statik, spelled the same way, or on Facebook. All my social media is under Rahamaan Statik. Hit me up on social media if you're interested in seeing more work or reaching out about any potential opportunities. Also, try to be more consistent with doing open house at my studio at the Bridgeport Arts Center every third Friday from 7 to 10 p.m. on 1200 West 35th Street, Unit 4022, off of 35th and Racine at the Bridgeport Arts Center every third Friday. So you can come to my studio, meet me one-on-one, and buy some artwork and merchandise. Right, I have a studio full of it, as you can somewhat see.
I can see it here. Statik, thanks for coming on today, man. I really appreciate your time and taking time out of your schedule to chat with somebody that you don't know well, but I think we know each other's work a little bit. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to this episode of My Home is Special. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes automatically. You can go to myhomeisspecial.com to see the full project and sign up for email updates. Be sure to follow KBevPhoto on Instagram or go to kbevphoto.com to see what I'm snapping these days. There's a lot on both to explore. For now, this is Keith, aka KBev, signing off. Peace.